I'm mixing up some cactus soil today, and I thought I'd make a video, as I promised to do for a long time, about my cactus soil mixes. They can be pretty eclectic, but there's some semblance of consistency. I'm just going to tell you my experience, what I usually end up doing. So what this is right here is crushed charcoal. Almost every potting soil I have for cactus is at least 50% crushed charcoal. I've used like a garden shredder, but for small scale, what you can do is just put it on a piece of plywood and stomp on it. And that's what I did with the shredder. Is a wooden start, and I didn't want to mess with it. You can also try to run it over with your car, but it's really not that effective. So as you can see, this contains like a mixture of fine and coarse stuff all the way up to maybe ½ an inch. There's an occasional big piece in here. I don't really want pieces this big. I want it to be, if I had to say like what I want, it's about corn kernel size and down, but I don't always take the time to actually do that. And I do want a bunch of very fine charcoal too, but you don't want just fine powder because it'll turn into it'll just pack and it won't aerate and you don't get the aggregate effect. So I'm going to link a video on my other channel where I talk a little bit about the rationale for using charcoal in cactus mixes and in soil in general. But suffice to say that it's like an aggregate, right? It's chunky, so it provides drainage, but it also absorbs and holds water, which is similar to perlite. It also can absorb and hold a lot of nutrients, which the plants can get back later in some cases, right? Like if this is full of nutrients, this piece, like, you know, plants aren't going to extract all those nutrients out of it, but with smaller stuff, it works. And in general, it just works. Like the proof is in the pudding, right? And my pudding works. You'll also see in here perlite. If I had a choice, I would actually just use charcoal as the only aggregate. And I've done that, and we're basically going to do that today. This stuff is left from some like recycled soil that I threw in here. So let's say that I'm, buying potting mix, like potting soil that's already mixed up. That's going to have like, I don't know what, probably 25 or 30%, 20 to 30% of perlite usually in it already as aggregate. So you already have a significant amount of aggregate. I will usually mix that 50-50 with crushed charcoal, and that's just about right for what I want. If I'm using something like this, which is Coco coir, so it comes in these blocks. This is a 5 kilogram compressed block, and when you add water, it turns into this much Coco coir. So if I'm using this, I'll add about 60-40 charcoal to coconut coir or whatever other fiber I'm using, up to like 70-30. As far as different fibers go, I mean, the common ones are peat moss, coconut coir, and bark, shredded bark of various kinds like fir bark and stuff like that. Of those, I like coconut the best. It lasts the longest in my experience. These are chosen for a combination of how long it takes them to rot, which is important, and then how much water they'll hold and all that stuff. I like this the best, and I usually buy it in these blocks. That's usually about the cheapest way to get it. So this charcoal is also already amended, and it's just made in kind of open piles and stuff and trenches. I'll link my biochar playlist again for my other channels. How to make this with just like a shovel and a hose, pretty much. It's very easy if you have wood and you can have burn piles. But this is also amended. So one of the issues with charcoal is that when it first comes out of the fire, it's really hungry for nutrients. If you amend it lightly, it'll just slurp any nutrients you put in there completely up, and they won't be available to the plants. This is why erroneously people often tell you that you have to pre-charge biochar before you use it. Well, the other option is that you just use it and then use extra nutrients for the first, 3 to 6 months, or even less, really. You want to take a gentle approach so you don't over-fertilize and hurt your plants. But typically, like if I'm mixing up a big batch like this, I'll throw in quite a bit of fertilizer. Like this has oyster shell, it has like a 5-5-5 dry organic mix. It kind of just depends on what I have. I threw coffee grounds in here. There's wood ashes in here for extra lime and minerals. Some crab meal, some fish bone meal, There's just a little bit of everything. But the main thing you want to worry about with the nutrient depletion, I think, is nitrogen. You can just use raw charcoal. I've done it before. It's fine as long as you're using enough dirt. Okay, so I had this charcoal all laid out, and I just put a layer of different, amendments on top of it. Again, kind of whatever I have. Things I would save for your soil that are just common everyday things. Coffee grounds, for sure. They're awesome. They have a lot of nitrogen. They have a lot of minerals. They're good organic matter. They're just great. Eggshells, good source of lime. Sort of like an aggregate. You can just save your eggshells in a basket, and then when you get a bunch of them, just crush them up with your hands or step on them and throw them in a mix like this. Wood ashes. So wood ashes contain lots of lime and lots of trace minerals, lots of potassium. They're underutilized, which is funny because they're the basis of a lot of traditional agriculture. What we call slash and burn is basically just releasing the nutrients in wood into ash and then using it to fertilize, grow stuff on it for 2 or 3 years and then move to a new spot and let that spot recover. So they're very valuable, and they contain a lot of lime. So if you're looking for calcium, as far as pH goes, I pay very little attention to that. I've never measured it. If anything, I want to shift toward the alkaline side, I figured, because I figured these things grow on like alkaline soils, and somebody told me that once. Other people have told me they add vinegar to their soil to make it more acidic. And I was like, weird, because, I use tons of lime, tons of charcoal, which tends to make mixes and soils alkaline from what I've heard. Again, I haven't measured it, but that's what I'm told. And I'll add wood ashes. So even like my flat mix for growing cactus seedlings will have all that stuff in them. Extra lime, extra ashes, 50% charcoal. Seems to work for me, but I just don't really worry about it too much. And, my cactus look really healthy, so I'm okay with that. Okay, so with these cocoa blocks, lay them in a wheelbarrow that's like fairly watertight. And this could take a little while, like maybe about like 20 to 30 minutes sometimes. And I'll put a fair amount of water in the bottom. Like they take up a lot of water, but you don't want it soggy and like you don't want it so you can like squeeze water out or anything like that. Look, I take this hose away. Look how fast it slurps down into the block. And then I'm going to turn this down, maybe even a little less than that. Yeah, like that. And I'll just leave that on the block. So in about 10 minutes, I want to come back because like basically what will happen is the bottom will be saturated and the top will be, and then there'll be like a sandwich of dry stuff in between, which you can, move that and treat separately or whatever. You'll figure it out. It's not rocket science. This was one 5 kilogram block of Coco coir. As you can see, that's maybe a quarter of the bulk of this. Let's go look at my plants while that soaks up and see how they look. How do they like growing in this stuff? So a lot of this is made with potting soil. Like I'll go to the grow shop. We have a lot of big grow shops around here from the cannabis industry, and they'll have like broken bags. So I'm always cruising those to see what I can get a good deal on. I'll use peat-based and bark-based stuff, but I don't like it. If I can get a good deal on Coco coir mixes, I'll use them. But again, they always have like a pretty large proportion of perlite in them. So you'll see a lot of perlite in these pots. And again, if I'm doing that and it's already like a well-drained, normal potting mix, I want about 50% charcoal. But as you can see, the plants look happy. I mean, again, the proof's in the pudding. Like until I start having serious problems, I'm not going to go like looking for information to confuse myself about what I should be doing with my cactus mixes. I mean, I'm very happy with these results. So I'm just going to keep doing what I do. And I really do feel that the cactus are very, very happy with it. They like it. And it has excellent drainage. It's hard to keep this stuff overwatered. It dries out pretty fast. You can see that as a bad thing, but when it comes to cactus, roots, I tend to think that's actually a good thing. Here, just see how we're doing here. If anything, there might be a little too much peat. So yeah, it's looking like about 60-40. If anything, we could use a little bit more of this. Here's some more charcoal. Yeah, that could be 60-40. 2 ways that I mix by myself when I have large amounts of stuff. One of them is to just mix it in the tarp by like pulling on the edges of the tarp. And the other is, I'm going to show you because that's what I'm going to use. This amount of stuff is too much to mix on this tarp with tarp mixing. It just won't work that well. I'm just gonna flatten this out. One thing people are concerned about with Coco coir is salt. I've used a bunch of it from different sources, never had any kind of problem. I just don't worry about it. Just gonna get this stuff piled up in the middle. Okay, so again, if this tarp was much bigger, I would just take this corner, say, and just drag it way over there and drag the whole pile and just fold it and roll it. And then drag it back and then drag it from each corner and just keep like mixing it. It works great. So it's the next morning here, and before I show you the main method I'm going to use, let me show you one other thing you could do here, which is just pulling, you know, using a big heavy tined hay rake, not a leaf rake. You just get all the way to the center and pull this stuff all the way out to the edge of the tarp, because it doesn't take a lot of energy. Then when we do this, look how much it mixes this. It just turns it over and over. So that's basically what tarp mixing looks like. It's just, again, if the tarp is big enough, you can keep pulling it and you can pull the whole pile way out to one side and then pull it back. And then, you know, given the tarp size, the main thing I'm going to do with this is this method. So I want to scoop in from the edges and throw the soil that side of center. Okay, so here's the center. I want the soil to go out. Now, as the soil falls, look how much it mixes, like it just spreads out. Because so now everything's shifting and I'm almost to the center of the pile. In fact, there, that's the center of the pile. We used to mix soil this way in big lots like this, bigger even, for growing seedlings on a farm I worked at. So, you know, 2 or 3 times around like that and it's pretty well mixed up. So what all this soil is really for this time around, filling these Anderson bands for cactus cuttings. So I have a bunch of cuttings to stick that I took, mostly King Tubby, but some other stuff too. And I use these square pots because they're super efficient and stable. So I have to put something in the bottom of each one that's porous. This is like some heavy duty weed cloth called geofabric. I just happen to have some scraps. I wouldn't like buy that and cut it up for this. And I have some other like mesh bags I've used. My favorite is probably like old shade cloth. Just, you know, you get a piece of shade cloth that's failing and it starts ripping and everything. This system is actually designed to go with these trays, which have like holes in the bottom. So you don't need anything in the bottom of them. You know, they're made to root prune, so you can just put this in here and then fill it with soil, but I'm using these as standalone pots. So, you know, handling this and looking at it, like I would prefer this had a little bit more aggregate. I would probably add another 10% of charcoal or something like that. But it's fine. I've used mixes with higher organic matter than this, but, you know, given a choice, I'd like it to be just a little more, which, you know, ideally to me, again, is just more charcoal. And the other thing is, like, this charcoal could have been crushed a little finer. I'd prefer to run it through my machine than to leave this many big pieces, because big pieces like this, they don't do a lot for the plant in terms of like it being able to hold nutrients and the plant get in there and get the nutrients. There is a lot of fine charcoal in here for that, but I'd like a little higher proportion of fines to chunky stuff, because this big chunky stuff is primarily just acting as aggregate. I have soil, but I'm out of pots, so it looks like I'm gonna have to order yet another case of these pots, which is not cheap, but look at that beauty and efficiency. I'm gonna stick some cuttings here and make sure everybody's labeled. Well, actually, these are all King Tubby, so I'll just come back and put it in metal labels. Pretty soon I'm going to be up to 100 cuttings, stuck and rooted, hopefully. I mean, a few of these are probably not going to make it, but some of these cuttings are pretty small. But now that it's not too hot in the greenhouse here, you know, most of them should make it. Just trying to get as many of these rooted and growing. Take a few pups off some of these, but mostly they're just to let grow from here out. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 19. So we're 5 short of 100. As soon as I get the pots to stick these guys, and look at these, like these are nice. I mean, this is more likely to succeed and bigger and has more green surface area than that. So yeah, I don't really care what the cuttings look like as long as they take and start growing.